It's David Ducker coming back at you, and today I'm going to be doing a re-review for Savage Worlds. I've already done a review, but I've been playing a lot more Savage Worlds, so I thought I would do an update, a re-review, a more accurate review for all of you. I'll probably leave the old one up, probably, but this one will be more accurate and more comprehensive, I hope and believe. So, the Savage Worlds rule set promises fast, furious, fun. That is their slogan, their catchphrase, and they do a pretty good job of delivering on that. We'll go through the book chapter by chapter. Chapter 1 is character creation. It's a point-based system, a skill-based system that is, where you use dice codes. So you have, I believe, 5 attributes and a list of skills. It's a short skill list. I believe it's only about 20 skills included in there. But because the attribute list is small and the skill list is small, character creation's really fast. And I think that's where they get the fast part of Fast, Furious, Fun. Because I don't think the combat's the fastest in the world, but we'll get to that in its due time. So the attributes and the skills, they are die-coded. Most people have a D6. If you're not very good, if you're not very strong, you might only have a D4. And then it goes up from there. D8, stronger than average. A D10, much stronger than average. A D12, that's Olympic level, getting close to the maximum human potential. So that's very simple. Whatever die you're testing, roll that kind of dice. 4 is the magic number, because even on a D4, even a weak character has a 25% chance of success. So if you hit 4 or higher, you succeeded, unless it's opposed somehow. You know, if you're rolling against someone, obviously the higher roll wins. And it's pretty much just that simple. You roll your attribute or your skill. You hit 4, you win, you succeed. You don't hit 4, you have failed. The skills, you can buy them up to your attribute very cheaply. So if your intelligence is 10, a D10, and you want to get up to a D10 in notice, then it's very cheap to do that. But if you want your notice to be a D12, well, that's beyond your inherent intelligence. So it costs a little bit more to do that. So you can train up to your skill cheaply. Exceeding your natural potential is very difficult. You can do it. It's just difficult to do. So I really like that system. There are also edges and hindrances. So edges are like your feats, your qualities, your benefits in another system. To give you a little perk, give you either some spell casting, some special combat maneuvers, make you tougher, stronger, whatever it is. And hindrances are their drawbacks, and they of course free you up more points either for edges, skills, or attributes. So pretty standard as far as the skill-based system goes there. Chapter 2 is the gear. It's got a good list. It's got lasers, force fields, it's got body armor, modern style, and it's got your swords, axes, mail armor, spears, medieval style. It's got a range of vehicles. Most of the vehicles are modern. They have a few ancient vehicles like a chariot and a wagon. And of course horse statistics. They have, I think, 2 different kinds of horses in the book. In the core book. This is a small tome, but they pack a lot into there. There are, of course, a ton of supplements for it. But in the core book, they have 2 kinds of horses for you, which for the page count is great. That's very good. That they even have any. I can think of, some core rulebooks have no horses at all. And this one, yes, the vehicles, fighter jets, speed boats, race cars, motorcycles, all of that right here in the core book, which is something that some rule sets, again, do not have included. So the gear, very good. Chapter 3 is the game rules. Right off the bat, wild cards. These are heroes. And anyone who's a wild card rolls, in addition to their attribute or skill, a d6. They're wild dice. And you take the higher. If your strength is a d12, but you're a hero, you roll a d12 and a d6. And whichever comes up higher, that's the one you take. So if your d12 lets you down, you hit a 1, but your d6 hits a 4, which is a success, you say, all right, thank God I'm a hero, baby, and you take up that d6. So I'll mention at this point, there are also exploding dice, which is called acing. So if you roll the maximum number, if you roll a 6 on a d6, you roll it again. You add the totals together, and that's your final result. This is important because for every 4 points, you beat your target, and usually 4 is the target. So usually it's 4, 8, 12, 16, and so on. They call that a raise. If you beat it by 4, that's a raise, much like a degree of success in other systems. This can give you bonuses above and beyond. A raise on your damage inflicts a wound. A raise on your fighting to injure someone gives an extra damage dice. So those are some basic dice mechanics. You also have bennies, which allow you re-rolls. By default, heroes have 3 bennies. If you're not a hero, if you're not a wild card, you get 0. So they allow you to soak damage and re-roll. So I quite like the way they did bennies, much like fate points or destiny points in other systems. They break it through combat. Combat's pretty simple. You roll your fighting against their parry. Parry is half their fighting plus 2. So it is technically counted as an opposed roll, basically as if they rolled the average of whatever it is, because on average you'll roll about half. And then they do give you the 2-point bonus as well, which can be useful. It makes sure that the offender has a slight advantage. The defender, this parry test, can benefit from a shield, however. If you have beat their parry, you've hit them successfully, you roll your damage, which is your weapon die code, and your strength, which will have a die code. So you roll 2 dice, add the totals, you compare that to their toughness, which is half of their vigor. Vigor is like constitution, fortitude in other systems. It's your physical toughness and health. Armor will be added to their toughness for the purposes of this. So damage versus toughness. Toughness is half their vigor plus their armor. And if you beat their toughness, they're stunned, they're shaken. So they're saying, ugh! And while you're shaken, if you become shaken again, that's a wound. Now remember, only heroes can soak wounds. Extras, unnamed characters, as soon as they take a single wound, they're out of the picture. Now, if you hit on a raise on that fighting test, you get an extra damage die, which is always a d6. And if you hit a raise on your damage against their toughness, you automatically inflict a wound. And they're still shaken as well. It might sound a little complicated. There are several steps to go through. No individual step is difficult, and once you've actually played through it, you'll realize it's quite easy. It is, in my opinion, a tiny bit slow because there are so many steps, but it's not the slowest system I've ever seen. You know, it's just above the midpoint in terms of speed. It's like a 6 out of 10, I would say, with 10 being lightning speed. They use a card system in the core book for initiative. It's very easy to homebrew out. I'd recommend homebrewing it out, where you take a deck of playing cards and you deal everyone a card, and you go in order of your cards initiative. So I believe an ace is the lowest and a king is the highest. So you can easily homebrew that out, but that's the core system. It's not the same as any other rule set. No other rule in this book uses cards, playing cards, except this. So I don't like that. It's inconsistent. It's confusing for new players. But it's very easy to homebrew that out. For shooting, you don't go against their parry. You just try to hit 4. That's a man-sized target. So shooting can be easier to hit someone, in theory, as well it should be. So they've definitely slanted the game rules in favor of shooting. Shooting is more useful, generally speaking, than fighting. Trying to make sure I'm comprehensive here. That's everything from Chapter 3 that's super important. Chapter 4, Arcane Backgrounds. Usually the magic system is my least favorite part of the rule set. For Savage Worlds, it's my most favorite part of the rule set. It's very simple, very easy, very straightforward, very homebrewable. Basically, they give you about 5 options for spell casting. You can have weird science, which is wacky inventions, superpowers, miracles, which are like priests and clerics, druids, magic, which is sorcerers, wizards, warlocks, and psionics for telepaths, espers, teeps and teeks, and that kind of thing. They all have very slight differences. Miracles are more reliable, but you have fewer options. Magic is less reliable than that, but you have more spells at any one time, or at least when you're starting out. Psionics are even less reliable than magic, and that superpowers are incredibly reliable, but you typically only get 1 or 2. So there are slight differences, but they function in very similar ways. You'll make your test against whatever your arcane skill is. So faith, psionic skill, spellcasting skill. You make your test against that 4 or higher, and you succeeded, I believe. Sure, I'm just going to double check that. Yes, it is. It's 4 or higher, and you succeeded. Now, every spell does have a power point cost. So they use a hybrid mana system, skill system. Despite that, the rest of the rules are so fluid. It's still wonderful to use. But you've got to make the skill and spend the points to use the power. However, the powers are very clearly written out. Each power can be powered by any arcane background. So you can have arcane healing, divine healing, superpower healing. The effect and the source totally separate. This is what allows you to homebrew, create your spell schools if that's what you want to do. That's the real versatility of this magic system. So it's functional, but it's modular, and that's what makes it really strong. I mean, both are important, but the modularity is harder to find. So the arcane backgrounds, Chapter 4, huge recommendation on that. Chapter 5 is all situational rules. So they go through things like mounted combat, fear, fatigue, cold, drowning, fire, heat, thirst. But they also have vehicular rules in there. We've been using these recently, and the vehicular rules are very excellent. So whenever your vehicle is struck or damaged, you make a driving test, or piloting, or boating, whatever you're inside of, riding if you're on a horse. And if you hit 4 or higher, you maintain control, but there still could be damage. And if you fail, there's a kind of it's called out of control. And you lose control of the horse, the plane, the boat, whatever you're driving. You lose control of it. And there's a small table. I'm not usually a big fan of tables, but it works in this context, and their table is very simple and easy to use. So your vehicle could start spinning, it could flip end over end, it could just slide one way or the other, you could lose speed, you could come to a stop. So the driving test has a consequence, But also there's the damage test. So if you receive damage to your vehicle, um, it does take wounds, but you also have this damage table, and again it is a table, but this will determine what's damaged, whether it's the propulsion, the maneuvering, the engine, if it's superficial damage, if one of the passengers is hit. So there's a nice little table for you there. So you could lose control but not get damaged. You could be damaged but not lose control, or you could lose control and get damaged, or you could be just fine and you succeed at both. But it's got a lot of versatility in that system. It's a lot better than other vehicular rule sets that I have seen. So I really wanted to highlight that. And it's so versatile, you can use it for all of those different things: carriages, chariots, planes, boats. And they have a few spec rules for each of those. Capital ships. It also has a mass combat system, which I have not used, but it does look quite detailed and quite strong. So maybe I'll even do another video review once I've actually used that system. Chapter 6 is game mastering. It's a small book, so it does not have the largest section, but it is of average quality. It's fine. There's no problems with the advice they give for game masters. I'd like to see more, but when you only have, I think it's under 200 pages, it's about 160 pages, so when that's all you have to work with, I applaud that they managed to get 10 pages in for a Game Master section. And Chapter 7 is called Villains and Monsters, so that's your bestiary, your NPC codex. Again, fairly small, but some core books don't even include that at all. So it might be small, but it's not. It is in existence. So they give you orcs, ogres, giants, trolls, skeletons, zombies, liches, vampires, werewolves. They give you all of that. They give you a lot of animals. There's I believe a wolf. I want to say a bull is in there, which you can use for any charging horned animal like a rhinoceros. I believe they have a bear and a lion and a constrictor snake, a viper snake, and several others certainly. Plus they have a few things you can use for sci-fi. I believe there's one mech, which you could use for a giant robot about 12 feet tall, or a mech suit. You could use the same stat block for that and just have a pilot inside. So in 160 pages, you're getting tremendous versatility. You're getting your fantasy monsters and gear and magic and miracles, but you're also getting spaceship rules, ray guns, body armor, a giant mech, and psionic powers if that's what you want to do, and mix and match, add superpowers, add weird science, and add some of the other modern things like all those vehicles they have in the modern day that they've listed for you. And it's a tremendous resource, is this book. The deluxe edition, which I do not have, is larger, it has more spells, and I'd highly recommend that too. So until I see you again, good day and good gaming.